Okay, so we're looking here now for narrative moments in this poem, which this is one of the easiest poems to carry out this process um, with because it naturally divides itself up into very separate narrative moments in a very regular physical form. So those narrative moments in the form of the poem are very clearly or interact very clearly. So it begins, they picked a canny up one morning, beat him soft like clay, and stuffed him down the belly of a waiting jeep. What business of mine is it, so long as they don't take the yam from my savouring mouth? They came one night, booted the whole house awake, and dragged Dan Laddie out, then off to a lengthy absence. What business of mine is it, so long as they don't take the yam from my savouring mouth? Chinwe went to work one day, only to find her job was gone. No query, no warning, no probe, just one neat sack for a stainless record. What business of mine is it, so long they don't take the yam from my savouring mouth? And then one evening, as I sat down to eat my yam, a knock on the door froze my hungry hand. The jeep was waiting on my bewildered lawn, waiting, waiting in its usual silence. So this poem is divided up into a series of very clearly defined episodes that roughly correlate to the structure of the poem. Because what we will have here is a description of a moment and then this repeated section of the poem, which is called a refrain, but we will deal with that a little bit more directly in the structure and form section. So this first narrative moment here that we see is the abduction and violent beating of Akani, who we presume, as the speaker is on first name terms with this person, some kind of either relative or friend. The abduction and violent beating of Akani, and then here the speaker's passive response. So we have the speaker's passive response to this. There's a second episode. They came one night, booted the whole house awake, and dragged Dan Laddie out, then off to a lengthy absence. What business of mine is it, so long as they don't take the yam from my savouring mouth? So here, the second narrative moment is at the abduction of Dan Laddie at night time and the awakening of his household or her household. So the abduction of Dan Laddie at night time and the awakening of his or her household. Then finally it's Chinwe. Chinwe went to work one day, only to find her job was gone. No query, no warning, no probe, just one neat sack for a stainless record. So what we have there is a person called Chinwe, who is fired, presumably from her job or his job, without prior warning or explanation. Without prior warning or an explanation. We think about the element of surprise in this story, which comes to us at the end. And then one evening, as I sat down to eat my yam, a knock on the door froze from my hungry hand. The jeep was waiting on my bewildered lawn, waiting in its usual silence. The poem ends as the military police come for the speaker. So we have this very clear relation between the form of the poem and its structures and the four episodes that make up its narrative. The abduction and violent beating of Akani and the speaker's passive response, the abduction of Dan Laddie at night time and the awakening of his or her household, the speaker's passive response. Chinwe, who was fired from his job without prior warning or explanation, the speaker's passive response. And then finally, The military police come for the speaker.